The smell of burnt toast lingered in the air, mingling with the heavy silence of the morning. Diane Thompson stood by the kitchen counter, hands wrapped around a chipped coffee mug, watching the fog settle outside the window. She hadn't slept much. Again. From the upstairs hallway came the shrill voice of her daughter, Melissa. "Mom. You left the washer running all night again. That's wasting water, and our money." Diane closed her eyes, swallowing hard. She didn't argue. Not anymore. What was the point? Diane was 58. A retired librarian. A widow. A grandmother. A woman who had spent her life folding corners into crisp hospital corners, reading stories before bedtime, clipping coupons, and staying up all night sewing Halloween costumes that Melissa would later say looked cheap. Years ago, when her husband died in a car accident, Diane held the family together with nothing but a modest insurance payout and sheer grit. She worked 2 jobs. She skipped meals. She never bought new shoes. And yet now, after everything, she was a burden. At breakfast, the room was filled with the clatter of dishes and the tap-tap of phone screens. Her 2 grandkids barely looked up. Melissa's husband, Josh, gave a grunt that passed for a greeting. No one asked how Diane slept. No one noticed she was even there. She placed a bowl of oatmeal in front of her grandson. "I said I wanted toast," he muttered. "You could at least make it right if you're not paying for anything," Melissa added, not even looking up from her phone. Diane's lips parted, maybe to say sorry. Maybe to say nothing at all. But the moment was already gone. Later that afternoon, Diane went to the mailbox. Bills. Ads. A letter from AARP. The wind picked up, biting through her thin cardigan. Her joints ached, but she didn't complain. Melissa met her at the door with an irritated scowl. "Can you please take your shoes off outside? I just cleaned the floor." Diane blinked. "It's 40 degrees out." "So? Just don't track your mess through the house again." In the evening, Diane reheated leftovers and set the table. Melissa didn't show. Neither did Josh. The kids ate in front of the TV. Alone in the dining room, Diane sat at the head of the table, staring at the empty chairs. She whispered a blessing over cold chicken and mashed potatoes no one would touch. "Amen," she murmured. "Even if they forget me, God, please don't." Her voice cracked on the last word. Later that night, as she folded laundry in the basement, she overheard Melissa upstairs, loud and unfiltered. "She's just always there, you know? Like, haunting the place. I can't even have friends over. I'm sick of babysitting my own mother. She's not a guest. She's just extra weight." Josh replied something low and mumbled. Diane didn't need to hear it. She'd heard enough. She sat down on a pile of towels and let out a shaky breath. Her fingers trembled. Her throat tightened. The same woman who once nursed Melissa through chickenpox, heartbreak, and postpartum depression, now had to fight back tears in a laundry room just to avoid being seen. That night, in bed, she stared at the ceiling. In the dark, she whispered, "You gave them everything. And now, you're nothing." She reached into her nightstand, pulling out an old photograph. Melissa at 5, in pigtails, hugging Diane with a gap-toothed smile. Diane smiled through tears. I used to be your whole world. But the next morning, Melissa's voice rang again through the hallway. You should think about a nursing home. This isn't working anymore. That was it. Diane didn't cry. She didn't beg. She didn't shout. She quietly packed a small overnight bag, slipped on her coat, and walked out the front door. No one asked where she was going. No one noticed she was gone. She drove aimlessly through the town she'd lived in for 30 years. Past the library where she'd once worked. Past the diner where she and her late husband used to meet for pie on Fridays. Past the park where she'd pushed Melissa on a swing, back when Melissa used to look up at her with awe. She ended up at a small coffee shop with foggy windows and a quiet corner booth. She ordered chamomile tea. She took out a notepad from her purse and wrote one sentence. It's time they remember who raised them. And with that, Diane Thompson began her return. Not as a guest, but as a woman with purpose. The next morning, Diane didn't go back. Instead, she sat in that same coffee shop, watching the world go by through misty glass. The waitress, a kind woman named Grace, refilled her tea without asking. She must have sensed something in Diane's silence. Something wounded. Something shifting. Diane wasn't running away. She was catching her breath, for the first time in decades. By the second day, Melissa finally noticed. Not because she missed her mother, but because no one had picked up the kids from soccer. Diane's phone buzzed with texts. Melissa, where are you? Melissa, Mom, seriously. Are you at CVS again? Melissa, this isn't funny. Diane didn't reply. Instead, she stared at the screen and wondered when the last time was that her daughter had asked, Are you okay? Just once. She opened a blank message, started typing, then deleted every word. No. Melissa didn't deserve explanations. Not yet. That evening, Diane met with Judith Langford, an old college friend who'd once gone into corporate law. Judith was successful, sharp as glass, and had never married, too busy outwitting boardrooms to raise brats, she'd say with a wink. They hadn't seen each other in 15 years. But when Judith saw Diane standing by her office door, she hugged her like they were 20 again. Over wine and a long conversation, Diane told her everything. The verbal abuse. The loneliness. The quiet humiliation. She acts like I'm some pathetic leftover in her fridge, Diane whispered, twisting her napkin. I gave up my retirement fund to help them buy that house. Sold my car so they could have a second one. I was always just there. And now she wants me gone. Judith's eyes narrowed. Diane, you raised a daughter. But she raised herself into a monster. I don't want revenge, Diane said. No, Judith agreed, pouring more wine. You want accountability. The plan came together quickly. Melissa worked at a mid-sized digital marketing agency in Arlington. She was a rising project lead, aiming for a promotion that would put her on the executive track. Diane had quietly followed the company's progress over the years, listening whenever Melissa bragged about quarterly growth or office gossip. What Melissa never knew was that the company had several silent partners, aging investors who were now looking to cash out. With Judith's help, Diane began buying their shares. Slowly. Carefully. No noise. She dipped into the inheritance left by her late sister, Margaret, a sum she'd kept untouched out of guilt. Margaret had no children. She'd always said Diane would know when to use it. This was the time. Weeks passed. Diane stayed quiet. Melissa assumed her mother was staying with a friend or sulking at some senior center. She was too busy preparing her big campaign pitch at work. On the outside, everything seemed the same. Inside the firm, though, something shifted. Board members were whispering about a new investor. Someone unusually silent. Someone who didn't want a seat, just influence. On the third Thursday of the month, the board received a proposal from a new stakeholder. The name on the document? Diane M. Thompson. The proposal was bold. It recommended revising the company's employee policy to support workers over 55. That included extended sick leave, flexible hours, healthcare stipends, and mandatory workplace respect training on ageism. It also included a new annual initiative, the Legacy Program, a mentorship track pairing older workers with new hires, framed as a way to preserve institutional wisdom. The motion passed. Melissa didn't even know who Diane Thompson was. Until the next board meeting. Melissa stood in the sleek conference room, presenting her proposal for a luxury hotel account. She was poised, polished, and hungry for validation. Her slides were crisp. Her pitch flawless. Then the chairman cleared his throat. Before we wrap, I'd like to introduce one of our newest major shareholders, here to observe today's session. Melissa barely glanced up until the door opened. And there she was. Her mother. In a tailored navy blazer. Hair done. Back straight. Eyes calm. Melissa blinked as if she were hallucinating. "Mom?" Diane offered a gentle smile. "Hello, dear. Please, don't stop on my account." Silence fell like a dropped glass. After the meeting, Melissa stormed into Diane's path. "What are you doing here? What the hell is this?" Diane looked her straight in the eye. "You always said I wasn't contributing. So I found a way to contribute. Just, not to your household. You're trying to ruin me." "No, Melissa. I'm just tired of being erased. You think buying shares gives you the right to embarrass me?" Diane stepped closer, her voice soft but steel-threaded. "I didn't buy shares to embarrass you. I bought them to protect people like me, people you step on when you want to feel taller." Melissa's jaw clenched, but she didn't respond. She couldn't. For the first time, Diane was the one standing tall. That night, Diane sat in her new apartment, a one-bedroom rental with a view of the city skyline. She lit a candle, poured a glass of wine, and stared out the window. Her phone buzzed with a text from Judith. "Judith, you did it." She's rattled. "Ready for phase 2? Diane smiled. No longer invisible. No longer ashamed. She typed. "Diane, let's shake the ground she walks on." 3 weeks later, Diane walked into the same building Melissa called her professional kingdom, but this time, Diane had the key to more than just the door. She now owned 17% of the company. No seat on the board. No loud announcements. Just quiet power, and a pen that mattered. Thanks to Judith's network of contacts, Diane had bought out 3 aging stakeholders and acquired influence without having to play the politics of corner offices or nameplates. She didn't want control. She wanted change. And now, she had leverage. It started with the HR department. Diane submitted a formal request to revisit company policy regarding age discrimination, offering a detailed report backed by national data, courtesy of Judith's research team. The pitch was wrapped not in emotion, but in profitability. Older employees equals institutional memory. Institutional memory equals cost-saving retention. Retention equals stability. A compelling math. She also lobbied for the legacy program to be expanded, not just mentorship, but guaranteed interview slots for workers over 50, and anonymous surveys about workplace culture regarding age bias. It passed 5-2. Melissa didn't even realize what was happening until her team budget got slashed to fund a new mentorship wing. Inside the office, whispers spread. Who's this Diane Thompson? She's funding half of the new wellness policy. She's connected to someone on the board, I think. Melissa still hadn't put the pieces together. She was too focused on salvaging a major pitch that kept getting delayed, because the copywriter, a 62-year-old woman named Martha, had taken sick leave under the new elder care policy. Melissa grumbled to Josh at home that night. It's like everyone over 50 suddenly got a blank check. Josh shrugged. Maybe it's time you got used to not being the center of the room. That didn't go over well. Meanwhile, Diane was thriving. She joined a local senior advocacy group. She got her first smartphone. She even went on a coffee date with a retired engineer named Bill, who wore suspenders and told charming stories about train stations. For the first time in years, her laugh was unrestrained. Her presence, undeniable. She moved into a modern one-bedroom apartment in a secure complex. It had hardwood floors, smart lighting, and no one rolled their eyes when she left the dishwasher open. She'd lived so long making herself small. Now, every corner of her life felt like it was expanding. The firm held its quarterly town hall in early spring. Melissa walked into the glass-paneled room, expecting to present progress updates on a campaign that had been riddled with late deliverables, thanks to the new accommodations for older workers. She was tense, lips pursed, knowing her numbers wouldn't sing. She didn't expect the guest speaker. Let's welcome one of our leading partners, someone who's been pushing for compassionate reform and progressive innovation, Ms. Diane Thompson. Gasps rippled. Melissa turned white. Diane took the mic, calm and composed. Thank you. I'm not here to criticize. I'm here to remind. That value doesn't fade with age. That experience isn't disposable. And that respect shouldn't be earned over and over just because your hair has turned gray. Applause thundered. Melissa didn't clap. Later, Melissa cornered her in the hallway. You think you're so noble, coming in here like some hero? Diane studied her daughter. No. I think I'm finally seen. You're making me look incompetent. You're doing that all on your own. Melissa's face flushed. You've always wanted to sabotage me. Diane's voice dropped, calm and cold. No. I wanted to love you without disappearing. But you made it clear love wasn't welcome unless it was silent, small, and self-erasing. I'm done with that. That night, Diane received a letter. It was from Martha, the 62-year-old employee Melissa had complained about. I was going to quit. I felt useless. Disposable. But your policy gave me the space to rest and return. Today, I trained 3 new hires. Thank you for making room for us again. Diane held the letter to her chest and cried. Not out of grief, but because, for once, the world felt fairer. And because maybe, just maybe, her voice wasn't too late after all. Melissa sat at her desk, arms crossed, lips pressed in a permanent scowl. The once confident rising star of the company was now drowning in memos. Budgets had been reallocated. The department was being restructured. Her team had lost 2 junior analysts to a new internal rotation program meant to diversify experience across age groups. And the worst part? Every time she tried to complain, she was met with the same calm response. These changes were passed by our major shareholders. She didn't need to ask who. She already knew. At home, the tension with Josh had grown like mold in silence. They barely spoke. One night, while Melissa vented about ungrateful old people hijacking the company, Josh finally snapped. She gave you everything. And all you did was step on her. She's manipulating the entire firm just to punish me, Melissa hissed. Or maybe, Josh said, standing, she just stopped letting you treat her like garbage. He slept on the couch that night. By choice. Meanwhile, Diane was invited to speak at a local leadership conference for women over 50. She spoke about invisibility, about survival, about rising from beneath your own erasure. I don't want revenge, she told the crowd. I want fairness. I want a world where sacrifice isn't met with silence. Where aging isn't treated like a failure. The crowd gave her a standing ovation. That video clip was posted to the company's internal channel by HR, under the title, Honoring the Voices We Forgot to Hear. Melissa nearly choked on her coffee. Back at the office, the ripple effects continued. Under the revised policy, Diane had pushed for bias training sessions, mandatory for all managers. Melissa was forced to attend. She sat through the hour-long presentation on unconscious ageism with her jaw clenched and arms folded, refusing to speak during the group reflections. The HR director later noted her resistance in the session's post-assessment report. That report made its way up the chain. Performance evaluations were coming. So was the new fiscal plan. And Diane had one final change to push through. She requested an internal audit of department morale scores, and flagged Melissa's division for review. The numbers were clear: high turnover, low feedback participation, poor intergenerational collaboration. The audit led to a surprise announcement. Melissa was being reassigned to an oversight role in compliance, a position with fewer direct reports and a smaller budget. Lateral move, they called it. But everyone knew it was a quiet demotion. Melissa stormed into the HR office. This is retaliation. It's personal. But the policy was airtight. And no one on the board would touch it. Not with Diane holding 17%. Back at Diane's apartment, she sipped tea as soft jazz played on the radio. Bill, the retired engineer, was making her dinner. Shrimp scampi. He was humming to himself. She checked her email. A note from the firm's CEO. Diane, I wanted to personally thank you. The culture shift we're seeing is extraordinary. You've given us all a reason to look in the mirror and do better. She smiled. That weekend, Melissa showed up at Diane's door. No warning. No apology. Just fire in her eyes. Are you done ruining my life? Diane didn't flinch. Ruining? I protected workers. I helped this company evolve. If that ruined your career, then maybe you weren't building something worth keeping. You'll lose everything if you keep this up. Then I'll lose it with pride. Melissa's voice cracked. You're just bitter. Diane took a slow breath. No, sweetheart. I was bitter. Now I'm better. She closed the door, softly, not with spite. With peace. That night, Diane watched the sunset from her balcony. The sky was painted in strokes of coral and gold. She thought of all the women like her, still sleeping on sofas, still being hushed, still shrinking themselves to fit inside someone else's comfort zone. And she whispered to the wind, "May they rise." Spring arrived like a breath of fresh defiance. Tulips bloomed along the office walkways. The company, once faceless and sharp-edged, now buzzed with something softer, respect. Employees over 50 felt a shift. Meetings ran differently. Eyes lingered longer on those who had once been overlooked. Diane watched it all unfold from the background, not as a tyrant, not as a saboteur, but as a gardener of change. The annual shareholders' meeting was held in late April in a grand hall downtown. Melissa arrived wearing a tailored dress that didn't hide her exhaustion. She had lost weight. Her eyes were heavy. Her voice clipped and practiced. She knew the meeting was more than routine. It was Judgment Day. Diane sat near the front. She didn't speak until asked. When her name was called to address the room, she stood, not with grandeur, but with grounded grace. My name is Diane Thompson. I'm a mother, a grandmother, a former librarian, and a proud investor in this company. I once gave everything I had to a family who forgot how to say thank you. So I gave that same everything to something else. A place where people could be treated as more than a number on a payroll or a line on a birth certificate. Silence blanketed the room. Even Melissa froze. You don't have to like me, Diane continued. But I hope you hear me. Age is not a sin. Kindness is not a weakness. And dignity is not negotiable. Applause erupted. Not the polite kind. The kind that shakes ceilings. Melissa didn't clap. But she couldn't look away. A week later, Melissa's contract was not renewed. Technically, she wasn't fired. The company had just decided to pivot toward new leadership. Her office was cleared in silence. Her LinkedIn quietly updated. No party. No farewell. Josh had already moved out. The children stayed mostly with him now. Melissa stood in the driveway of the home she had once called hers. The grass was overgrown. The porch light flickered. The mortgage payment was late. She sat in her car and stared at the front door. And for the first time, she cried. Not out of anger, but out of recognition. Out of finally seeing the woman she had dismissed for so long, not as a relic, but as a force. Diane, meanwhile, thrived. She was offered a paid advisory role at a national nonprofit for elder rights. She declined. "I'm done working for approval," she said. "Now, I live." She planted herbs on her balcony, learned how to play the ukulele, took weekend trips with Bill, read the paper each morning with her feet tucked into fuzzy socks and her mind free of insult. One Friday afternoon, she opened a handwritten letter from an intern at the company. "Dear Ms. Thompson, I watched you speak at the town hall. My grandma helped raise me. I wish she could have seen you that day. Thank you for being brave. You changed more than policies. You changed people." Diane folded the letter and smiled. She had never set out to be a hero. She just refused to disappear. That evening, she hosted dinner. Not for Melissa. Not yet. But for her 2 grandchildren, who had started asking to visit more often. They sat around a small table filled with roast chicken, mashed potatoes, and the scent of forgiveness, not given, but waiting. She didn't speak about their mother. She just listened to their laughter, passed them more gravy, and let the warmth of the room stitch something quietly whole. Across town, Melissa received a package. No note. Just a framed photo. A younger version of her mother, smiling wide, holding a toddler Melissa on her hip. Taped to the back were 5 words, written in soft cursive. "Even silence has a memory." Melissa stared at it for a long time. And for the first time in her adult life, she whispered, "I'm sorry, Mom."